Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Nguyen. Alright, in this lecture I will be talking about composing your literary analysis essay. At this point, we are ready to move on. This week you were supposed to have read the two assigned short stories, The Story of an Hour and Good Country People. You were supposed to post a discussion thread to the short story discussion board right here, responding to one of these discussion prompts in a 100-word paragraph, and you were supposed to pose a question for the rest of the class to engage with. And I read all of everybody's posts yesterday. All who posted by yesterday I read, and I email comments and feedbacks to each and everyone who posted something in the discussion board. And my comments and feedbacks are really meant to help you understand a little bit more about what it is that you were supposed to do, right? So you can look at this assignment as a kind of mini exercise or mini introductory exercise to analyzing short stories, right? So of course it goes without saying that I didn't expect for everyone to fully grasp the concept, okay? And based on a lot of the responses, many of you did not, but that's okay. My comments and feedbacks were meant to kind of help you understand, to point out what it is that that your response did not do right, how it was not analytical, right? So basically, the main idea behind it is to kind of put you back on the right track, and all of that is really meant to further enhance your understanding of literary analysis so that you won't make the same mistakes in your essay, in your literary analysis essay, which is coming up. Okay, so those of you who did not post, okay, really is at a disadvantage, because if you don't post something, you do not give me a chance to gauge your understanding of this skill, right? And you fail, and in so doing, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to practice and improve your analytical skills. Okay, so if your literary analysis essay is really going to be the first time you're going to exercise this skill, you're really opening yourself up to a lot of room for mistakes and errors, and those mistakes and errors will reflect in your grade that you receive for the essay. Okay, so take all of the activities that I asked you to do in preparation for assignments. Take advantage of all of them, right? Because they are really meant to give you an opportunity to exercise certain skills and to give me an opportunity to, again, gauge your understanding of the skills. And if I see so that I can identify areas for improvement and point them out to you so that you can improve. Otherwise, how else would you improve? Okay, so it's still early. It's still early, and the discussion board is still open. So like I say, if you have not made a post, or if you have not participated in the discussion board, go ahead and do that now. I will not read this discussion board after this week. Okay, so tomorrow is really my last day of checking this discussion board for new posts, right? So it's really, tomorrow is your last chance to participate and to give yourself, like I said, an opportunity to show me what you understand and what you don't understand, so that I can help you understand more. Okay, so I will leave here tomorrow at 4:30, and by tomorrow I mean Thursday. Okay, I will leave here at 4:30, and hopefully by then you will have submitted something. But starting next week, I won't, check the discussion board, and we'll be moving on to something else. All right, so I have given a lecture on literary analysis. Okay, by going through this literary analysis intro PowerPoint file that I've uploaded here. So if you need to review that for yourself, go ahead and do that. If you have not listened to the video lecture, make sure you do that. And it seems like, well, not seems like, I know that many of you have not, based on the number of views that the video has received, right? And also based on your discussion post, okay? Because if you have viewed the lecture and taken notes and attempted to understand, you know, the principles of literary analysis, then many of you would not would have provided a more in-depth, insightful response than the ones that you than what you posted. All right, so now we're moving on. I trust that by this point, like I said, you've read the short stories, you've thought about it. Okay, so now let's talk about how to compose a literary analysis essay, the structure and elements that your essay must demonstrate, must have. All right, so at this point, okay, hopefully you have narrowed down your choice between the two texts. Okay, so you can write on either the story of an hour or Good Country People. Hopefully you have looked at the writing topics that I posted, and that you will pick one from the list for your focus, all right? Because like I said, you have to have a focus for any kind of essay that you write. You have to know what you're writing about, and you have to know what you're analyzing, what small element or what aspect of your text you're analyzing, because you're not analyzing the whole entire thing or just anything as it captures your attention. Okay, you have to have a main point, you have to have a main idea, you have to have focus, you have to have structured. Okay, you have to know where you're going, and you have to know how to get there. All right, so those are some of the things that you as a writer of your essay have to decide. I cannot tell you what topic to write on, which writing topics that I've given to choose. Now, if none of my writing topics appeal to you, and you would like to focus on some other aspect or element of your short story that I failed to point out or ask, you know, you can certainly do that. Okay, just make sure that it's narrowed enough. All right, so since this is our first essay and the first few weeks of class, we read and we discussed the overall structure of an academic essay, right? The first few chapters of your textbook, hopefully discuss that. Well, discuss the writing process, and I posted content materials that should have given you, that you should have read and should have given you an overview of the kind of an overview of the essay structure that you'll be reflecting, or that you'll be using for your course compositions. Okay, so we talked that there are three essential components to any kind of academic writing, to any kind of essay. Essay is an academic form, right? And within that form must be these three essential components that make up the entire essay structure. You got to have your introduction, you have your body, and you have your conclusion. And we've talked about how the shorter essays that you'll be writing in this class will be consisted of 5 paragraphs, and these components, right, will be distributed over 5 paragraphs. So your first paragraph will be your introduction, your next 3 paragraphs make up your body, and your final paragraph is your conclusion paragraph. So let's talk about the introduction, the introductory paragraph of a literary analysis essay. How do you start? What do you include? And how do you end that introductory paragraph? All right. An introductory paragraph of a literary analysis essay should contain background information, context, and focus, and a thesis statement. That's a given. All right. The body is where you show your thesis, drawing your support from specific textual evidence and secondary sources, which is optional. And your conclusion, you wrap up the main point of your argument in a concise manner and leaves the reader with final insightful statements about your subject. So these are just, the general elements that each component should have, or these are the general pattern of development that each component should have in any essay, in any academic essay. All right, so the introductory paragraph in a literary analysis essay should provide background information about your literary text. Okay, so for this essay, your introduction, somewhere in the beginning of your introduction, your readers should know the name of the literary text that you will be analyzing and the author, right? So these are all part of the background information that you have to provide. So for example, if you're analyzing the short story Hills Like White Elephants, right, you may begin the introductory paragraph with the general statement about hills like white elephants. But in this general statement, you must give the title of the short story and the author. So for example, Hills Like White Elephants is one of Ernest Hemingway's most studied and anthologized short stories. Okay, and this introductory statement, this first sentence in the introductory paragraph of your literary analysis essay, should be, or you can follow this beginning statement with a brief summary of the short story. Okay, and keep your summary short and general, no minor details from the story. And notice that I bolded the phrase brief summary because if you recall in my lecture on literary analysis, I said that literary analysis is not a summary of the text, of the literary text. But that doesn't mean, which means your essay should not tell me from more or less beginning to end what the short story is about. I mean, your essay, okay? But that's not to say that you cannot refer to the short story, for support. So you can certainly refer to, a certain passage in a short story, a certain line, a certain scene, certain instance or detail, right? Point it out and show how it supports your argument or interpretation and in what way it does. But in order for you to do that, of course you have to kind of contextualize that detail or that passage or that scene to kind of remind your reader what it is. Okay, so it's okay for you to do that throughout the story every now and then, but only for supporting purposes. Okay, so in your introductory paragraph, after your background, so your background information would include a brief the name of the literary text, the author's name, and a brief summary of the short story. So you can start out something like this. Hills Like White Elephants is one of Ernest Hemingway's most studied and anthologized short stories. This beginning statement tells me, okay, what is the literary text in question? That's that. Who is the author? That's that. And the statement also tells me something a little bit about, the short story and how popular it is in a sense. Okay. Then this beginning statement is followed or can be followed by a brief summary of what the story is about. So the introductory paragraph continues with, it is seemingly a simple story about a couple's discussion of a crisis in their relationship while awaiting to board a train in Barcelona to Madrid, Spain. The specific nature of the issue in question remains a private concern between the couple and is precariously guarded from the curiosity of readers by the evasive language used. Upon closer examination, it becomes evident that the couple is trying to decide whether or not the woman should have an abortion. So the brief summary of the short story is captured in about 3 or 4 sentences, right? Without having read the story, without your having read the story, you know that it's about a couple waiting to board a train, right? And of course they're talking And well, in the course of waiting, we find out that they are concerned with a very big issue in their personal relationship, which is whether or not they should have an abortion. All right, so that's pretty much the entire story. And this brief summary, nicely captures that. All right, so after your brief summary in your introduction, in your introductory paragraph, okay, next, after that, you want to establish a narrowed focus for your analysis. Okay, by that I mean after the summary, you want to you want you want to start focusing on you want to start focusing on an aspect of the short story that you want to analyze and make meaning out of, right? That you want to analyze and interpret. Okay, so after the summary, you need to gradually make this clear. So you point out, you know, so you point attention, or you draw attention to what that aspect or element of the story that is of interest to you, and you say something about it. You contextualize it, and then you clearly express the point of interest in the story. So after the brief summary, your introduction can continue with this. One of the most fascinating aspects of the story that continues to draw critical interest is the revelatory nature of the kinds of language used by the man and woman in the story. Critics have long noted the constructive power of language in conveying an underlying dynamic in the relationship that presumably renders the woman weak and the man controlling. Okay, so these two statements have the effect of zooming in, focusing on one aspect of the short story's criticism, or one aspect of interest in the short story, and that aspect has to do with language, the language used by the man and the woman in their dialogue with one another, in their discussion. Okay, and how that language is very revealing in the absence of other details, right? Through the language that they used, that the man and the woman used, the word choices, how differently they speak, we come to understand their conflict. We come to understand the issue, and then we are given a kind of glimpse into the dynamic of the relationship. So the language here is of interest to this writer, to this literary analysis. All right, so once you've established what about the story, what aspect or element of the story is of interest, right, that will be focused on in the essay, you move your paragraph towards a conclusion, toward the end, by clearly expressing a thesis on the aspect of the story that you've narrowed for your focus. Okay, so your thesis statement is the last sentence of your introductory paragraph, and it should identify the element of focus, that one part in the story, one element in the story that your essay will focus on, and what you make sense of it, and provide an interpretation of what it may mean. So a thesis statement that concludes this introductory paragraph, paragraph on Hills Like White Elephants, focusing on the language aspect, could read something like this. A close reading of the use of language shows that her seeming weakness belies a quiet strength and self-agency not easily perceptible because it exists in the shadow of language. Okay, so basically what this thesis statement is saying about the constructive power of language is that if you closely examine the language uses by the woman in the relationship, right, you can argue that instead of appearing or instead of being somewhat weak and submissive to the man, the use of her language and how she maneuvers it and how she kind of moves the conversation along, okay, actually strongly suggests that she is that she knows who she is, and that and she knows what she wants, and that she has a quiet strength and a self-agency that we don't necessarily see right away. It's not necessarily, perceptible immediately, right? But upon closer examination, you see its pattern. You see how it does exist. Okay, so that's the thesis statement of this literary analysis essay in this introduction, and that's one way that you can structure your introductory paragraph. That's one way that you can develop it from that you can take it from general to from broad to narrow. All right, so next, after the introductory paragraph, is your body. This is, of course, the most substantial component of your essay. The body paragraphs is where you show what you mean in your thesis. The body paragraph is where you illustrate your thesis, and you illustrate it with textual evidence, with strong supporting details. And one type of supporting details that you can use and that are very, very powerful and persuasive is textual evidence. Okay, and textual evidence simply means evidence from the story, right, that support or that can be shown to support your argument, your interpretation, whatever that may be. So textual evidence can be, like I said, a specific detail in the story, a specific part or passage, a specific line, a specific instance or scene or anything like that, okay, can be textual evidence used to support, your ideas. All right, so, but as with any body paragraph, in any essay, the basic elements that make up all body paragraphs remain the same. You have to begin with a topic sentence, and the topic sentence at the beginning of each body paragraph tells your reader what the main idea of the paragraph is. Okay, so each topic sentence of each of the 3 body paragraphs must support one aspect of the thesis, because the whole function of the body of the essay is to develop and support the thesis of the essay, the main idea of the essay. So it can do that in 3 stages, in 3 parts, in 3 different paragraphs, with each paragraph supporting one side of the thesis or one dimension of the thesis. Okay, so an example of a topic sentence in the same literary analysis essay on Hills Like White Elephants can be this: one symbolic signification of the woman's strength and power comes from her right to keep or abort the pregnancy, and the process by which she comes to a decision also produces a moment of awakening. Okay, so the topic sentence should be interpretive, just like the thesis. It should be insightful and original, and should not contain any element of outside sources. All right. Following the topic sentence, you need to qualify the main idea. Okay, so you need to contextualize it. For example, the couple's dilemma hovers over everything they say and do at the train station, and by dilemma we mean, the dilemma to keep or abort. Their dialogue seems to have an innocuous, insignificant beginning and delineates in a deceptively meandering manner. The beginning of the exchanges between the couple reveals an undercurrent of the woman's quiet strength and isolation from the man. All right, so these sentences are kind of setting you up for this paragraph, developing and supporting how the woman uses language, the way the woman uses language in the beginning of the short story, and how it indicates and how already at the beginning of the short story, or beginning of her dialogue with the man, right, she's already showing this she's already showing a sense of self-possession already. All right, and she's already showing some type of some type of control in the situation, even though it may not be obvious. But if we look at her word choices, the words that she used, and how she kind of navigates around the conversation and moves it in a different directions, right, it's very telling. It's symptomatic of that control. So after the topic sentence, these sentences right here is just, again, kind of briefly overview the beginning of the dialogue to set us up for further discussion. All right, so after that setting up part that follows the topic sentence, the rest of this body paragraph is going to provide evidential support, textual evidence for how the essay interprets these moments of communication as far as the woman is concerned. So in order to effectively provide evidential support, one type of evidence that must be used is textual evidence. So textual evidence drawing support from the actual short story itself is absolutely mandatory. It is required. You have to refer to the short story to support your argument. And like I've explained, textual evidence is specific examples, instances, or details from the story that can be shown to support an interpretation of the text. All right. So an example of, so this is how the rest of that body paragraph can continue. It is important to note that the woman opens the dialogue and continues to influence its course. She is the one to suggest that they get a drink, and she is the one to decide that the beer be the beverage of their choice. Okay? And so this sentence right here, it is important to note that the woman, again, sets us up for the scene of that is being presented for support, for the scene that's being analyzed and interpreted. And this highlighted sentence is an example of a textual evidence being provided, right? This is an instance, a specific moment in the short story, right? And it appears on page 475. So that's the source, and Hemingway is the author. So this highlighted sentences here and here are two examples of textual evidence of, actual instances from the short story, right, that is being paraphrased or quoted, okay, to show evidential support for whatever argument is being made here, right? So the argument being made is that it is important to note that the woman opens the dialogue and continues to influence its course, right? And to support this idea that she does open the dialogue, but to support the idea that she influenced the course of the dialogue, okay, the textual evidence used to support this idea, how she is already exerting her influence early on in the beginning, is that she is the one to suggest that they get a drink, and she is the one to decide that beer is, the beverage of their choice, right? So she's the one who said to the man, let's order a beer while we sit here and wait. Pretty much that's the gist of her suggestion, okay? And then after the textual evidence, and you'll notice that this textual evidence is cited in the writer's own words, in the essay writer's own words. So there's no quotation. She's simply paraphrasing what happens in this particular moment in her own words, but she does document the scene, this particular moment in the short story, right? So anytime you draw something, you take something from a literary text, you have to document it like this. An MLA style dictates that you document, that you provide in-text documentation with the parentheses like this at the end of your textual evidence. And the parentheses must contain the author's last name and the page number in which, the detail appears, or rather in which this moment appears. Then after, and this sentence, right, where this example of textual evidence is called in-text citation. Okay, in-text citation. This pattern, so after you give your textual evidence, right, your in-text citation of textual evidence, one textual evidence, you have to, of course, introduce it, but you have to discuss it. Okay, you have to discuss it in terms of how it supports your argument, how it supports this idea. Okay, so you explain as this pattern of the woman's making suggestions and the man's ordering continues and reinforces the idea that the woman is aware of the subtle, nuanced power of language and uses it to her own advantage. This kind of perception eludes the man's consciousness. Okay, so the man doesn't seem to realize the woman's subtle power, right? Power over the situation, or control over the situation, and subtle control over the outcome of the situation. Okay, because the man doesn't think in that sense. The man is not that abstract or not perceptive, right? The man's consciousness is pretty much informed by tangible things that can be seen and felt, right? By things that are man-made and constructed. He's not one of those people who has any kind of imagination, right? Or depth or imagination, or see things beyond what they are, or see things much beyond what they are. Whereas the woman is different. She is less artificial. She sees things. She is imaginative and creative, and she sees things beyond their physical appearance, and she's able to see their potential. Okay, so that's the fundamental differences between the man and the woman, and it does play out in the ways that they use language. Another significant indication of the woman's agenda driving the course of their interaction is the numerous repetitions of the number 2 within the first page of the story, right? 2 minutes, 2 big beers, 2 beer glasses, 2 felt pads, 2 Ennis de Toro, Hemingway, pages 475 to 476. So this highlighted passage is another example of textual evidence that is used to further develop and support the idea that the woman is in control. All right, and that all this time that she's in control, right? She's thinking about the pregnancy. She's thinking about what she would want, right? And the language that are being used, right? And the language that's being used gives us a hint of what she's somewhat inclined towards. She seems, right? And if you read carefully the story, you notice that the first couple of pages, right, has the number 2, has this mentions the number 2 quite a few times. And if there's anything that you should, and if there's any kind of thumb rule that you should go by, or that you should keep in mind when you analyze serious literature is that nothing is accidental. So the number two, so the repetition of the number two in the first couple of pages of the short story does have significance, and it is our job literary um, as literary critic to figure out and to interpret what that number two could possibly mean, what it could possibly signify. So in the context of the woman's strength and in the context of the pregnancy and 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 the tension or the issue that the pregnancy is causing, of course the man doesn't want the child, and the woman, we don't quite know what she wants. We don't quite know if she wants to keep the child or not, right? But in the course of the conversation, she does seem to keep asking him, are we going to be okay? So she seems to be preoccupied with keeping their relationship intact. She seems to be concerned with not allowing anything to get to to um, to separate them, to make them um, grow apart. And the pregnancy, certainly has the potential to do that. But so in the context of all of that, the repetition of the number two is significant perhaps is significant in that um, it could suggest something about what the girl wants, or it could suggest two possible outcomes of the situation. Okay, so so the writer of this essay explains all that, right, after giving this in-text citation, which is textual evidence. And you note that this in-text citation, right, the textual evidence is given as a quotation, but notice that the quotation is embedded within the writer's own sentence construction, within the writer's own words. So so that's something to keep in mind if you're going to use certain details from the text for support, and you're going to quote some small part of it. Make sure that you just don't throw the quote out there without embedding it within your own words. Okay. So it follows the same kind of form, the same MLA format for in-text citations. Okay. It has the parenthetical citation punctuating the sentence, and inside the parentheses you have the author's last name and the page number, or and the page numbers in which the quotation appears, 2 minutes to be, and all of that. All right, and then you'll see that after this textual evidence, this citation of textual evidence is given, you have an explanation for what these two mean, for what this textual evidence mean, or how the essay writer wants it to mean. So it's going to explain, so it's going to explain what the two means, or why it keeps being repeated a few times throughout the first 2 pages. So the explanation is: the significance of the number two can be understood in many ways. One possible significance that is cohesive to the girl's secret desire is that it symbolizes a cocoon enveloping and having room for only two entities: the woman and the man in the relationship, sans baby or without baby, or the woman and the baby without the man. The latter seems to be more of the case, as the ending suggests. All right. So the explanation of this textual evidence explains that the number two could mean two possible outcomes, as far as the pregnancy is concerned and how it affects the relationship. Two possible concerns: the man and the woman without the baby, or the woman and the baby without the man. And the paragraph, and furthermore, the paragraph has reasons to believe that the second possibility, the woman and the baby, is more It's more in line with what the woman actually wants, because the ending suggests that. All right. All right. So, okay. So we've talked about the topic sentence of the body paragraph. We've talked about setting up, your evidence, and we've talked about how to give your evidence in MLA style, and we've also talked about how the importance of textual evidence and how textual evidence should be embedded or should be integrated into the paragraph, and how they should explain, and how each textual evidence should be followed by an explanation of its significance, because it's not enough to just say, well, in so and so this happens, right? You have to explain, okay, what does it mean, right? What does it show? And then you end your paragraph with informed, ascertained, and well-supported statements reiterating the main idea or interpretation of the paragraph. So, ending statements of a body paragraph should integrate textual evidence in the insightful understanding of one aspect of the thesis. Do not end paragraph with a citation. Okay, so the ending to the body paragraph that we've been reading could be something like, as the examples show, and the examples are the two textual evidence given, right? So it refers to those two in-text citations. As the examples show, the woman's agency is subtly but powerfully suggested at the beginning. Equally important to note is how her agency is able to move without being detected or registered by the men. This disconnection sets the tone of the relationship and marks the isolation from each other. Because of this isolation, the man and the woman cannot be the two. Okay, remember, the second textual evidence points out, the repetition of number 2, and then following that is the interpretation of what the two could possibly mean, and how the woman and how it's probably representing the woman and the baby rather than the man and the woman. And in this conclusion to this paragraph, right, we have an explanation why it seems that the woman and the baby are the two and not the man and the woman. So it has textual evidence because of the isolation, because of the seemingly disconnection between the man and woman. They don't really connect on any level. Okay, I've talked about how they are fundamentally different. He's more of a artificial type, and she's more of a nurturing woman, imaginative, imaginative, soft kind, right? That sees things, who can see things beyond their appearance. All right, so that's an example of a body paragraph. All right, so let's recap. You have your topic sentence, and then you have your discussion of the main idea, setting up the textual evidence, and then you have your textual evidence, and then following each textual evidence you have an explanation of what it means, what the evidence means, or what the evidence shows, okay, and how it supports the main idea. And then next, let's talk about the conclusion paragraph, which is the final paragraph of the essay. The conclusion paragraph, like in any essay, should reassert the thesis of the essay and its major evidential support. The conclusion should offer comprehensive, final, insightful statements regarding how the text is interpreted and understood within the scope of the essay. All right, so an example of a conclusion paragraph for this essay that we've been reading can be something like, in some way, this story can be understood as the awakening of the woman's realization of her ultimate desire. Interestingly, she seems to make the decision about the state of the relationship in the private negotiation of her mind, impenetrable by the man. Although her exchanges is with the man throughout the conversation, he continues to remain the outsider. oblivious to the undercurrent and process of the woman's self-agency. Her sense of agency quietly vibrates from the beginning and strengthens in cadence at the end before they board the train. Glimpses of the woman's interiority are captured in the way she moves in and out of their dialogue and the subliminal signification with which she imparts to her words. All right, so this paragraph kind of sums up how the essay gives the woman sees or interprets the woman as someone very far removed from the man in any way, shape, or form. Even though she's in a relationship with him, she's in his company, how she's pretty much her own self, how she keeps pretty much herself and everything else that is internal to herself, and how she goes through the process of making the decision pretty much all by herself. So while the man may be kind of oblivious to all that because she's clever, or because he's just that dense that he doesn't have um, any kind of sensibility, right, to see through the artifice. Okay, to see through artifice. All right. Um, and as a result of that, she is not a weakling. She is not subservient. If anything, she is very much self-possessed, and that's what this conclusion is kind of saying. So in a way, it kind of wraps up nicely um, the thought and the main thesis of the essay, which is that the woman is actually very strong, very self-possessed, unlike how she's been viewed in the past by literary critics in general. Okay, and we can see her sense of strength and self-agency and possession in the way that she moves in and out of language, and in the way that she manipulates her language, and in the way that she understands, the underlying implications of her words. All right, and that is the end of this PowerPoint, at the end of the lecture. Your essay is due soon. Check the module calendar for the specific date, but I have it right here. So let me see. Your literary analysis essay is due on February 16th. Okay, so start working on that once you have a close reading of your chosen short story, the story of an hour, A Good Country People, and revisit this lecture as you compose your literary analysis essay as needed, but you need to listen to the entire lecture as it is, to help you better prepare for the writing of the essay. Next week, we will move on to a discussion of plagiarism.